بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Today is our second day for the CILE Summer School, which we jointly organize with Weill Cornell Medicine in Qatar and with the World Health Innovation, with the World Health, with the WISH, also here in Qatar. We are very happy today to have Dr. Khalid Al-Awad. Dr. Khalid Al-Awad is a medical doctor and public health consultant. Dr. Khalid works currently at the Primary Healthcare Corporation here in Qatar. I personally have seen how much engaged he is in the issue of vaccination and infectious diseases in general. And I personally, I'm a personal witness of his discussions and sometimes heavy debates, even with colleagues, doctors, about the complexities around vaccination and around infectious diseases. Today, he will speak with us about vaccination policies and regulatory framework, in which we will focus on Qatar and possibly also other parts of the world. We are very happy to have you, Dr. Khalid, with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Muhammad. Thank you for having me with you here in this school program. Good afternoon, everybody. Today we'll be speaking about vaccination policies and regulatory framework in Muslim world, and we will have some reports from Qatar. Unfortunately, I couldn't find much data about the Muslim world, so some of the data will be developing world, as much of the Muslim countries are in the developing world. So in this presentation, we will be speaking very slightly about the importance of vaccination, vaccine regulation, vaccine ethics, vaccine hesitancy, and what's happening in the Muslim world and vaccination in Qatar. As you all know, and yesterday described by Dr. Laith, my colleague, that vaccines are the most inexpensive means of improving the health and lowering morbidity and mortality caused by infectious disease. This has been said by Dr. Bound. Dr. Bound, he's a Malaysian microbiologist, microbiology educator, and he's advisor for WHO. As you know, that vaccination actually one of the factors that changed the map of diseases. Before that, our parents, our grandparents, many of them have died from infectious diseases like TB, polio, tetanus. Nowadays, we don't see much of these diseases, and some of them already eradicated. Example of that, smallpox. In public health, usually we use three terms all the time. We use the term disease control and disease elimination and disease eradication. When we say control, this means that the disease, there is acceptable level from incidence of the disease, and how many cases of the disease, that it's controlled inside the community. And when we say elimination, reducing the number of the cases until we reach zero in the community, and eradication is the total absence of the causative agent in the environment, not only in the human, even in the environment. The WHO estimate that extended program immunization have been growing, and the immunization coverage have been grown from 5% in 1970s to 86% in this year. It reached 90% even in 90s, but it reduced again, and this is because multiple reasons that we will discuss later on. These are some of the diseases that we don't see, rarely see nowadays. The devastating complication of polio, and here in Qatar, alhamdulillah, polio have been eradicated, and we are just waiting for eradication in the whole world of polio. Smallpox, this disease, we don't see it anymore. The disease that leave people with scars all over their lives, and the whole humanity celebrated that this disease is no longer, we have it. The causative agent of this disease is no longer available in our environment. Tetanus was a huge burden, especially neonatal tetanus and for newborn babies. And measles also, we still have sporadic cases of measles. And actually this year, alhamdulillah, we don't have any case of measles. And hopefully that we will eradicate measles very close here in Qatar. And all of these diseases are disappeared because of vaccination, the main reason of that. Okay, when we talk about vaccine regulation, so vaccine regulation includes a range of measures that can vary from country to country. But mainly there is these functions according to WHO. Number one is the licensing, the manufacture, import, export, distribution, and promotion of and advertising of the vaccine, assessing the safety, efficacy, and quality. There was a lot of talk about COVID vaccination. Is it safe? Is it effective? How long it have been marketed? How long it have been tested? So all these things usually goes with vaccine regulation, and then inspection and making sure that we have a good surveillance for the disease itself and good surveillance for the adverse reaction, following immunization. Manufacturers also have to be inspected very well. Controlling and monitoring quality of vaccine existing in the market, also on promoting and advertising with the vaccine and controlling that for the target group. Making sure to monitor the adverse reaction, as I said before, and providing independent information through professionals. They know exactly what they look for vaccination. Sometimes when we have adverse reaction from immunization, it's very difficult to have the causation or the casualty or the you make a causative agent, how that adverse reaction happened, and is it related to vaccine or not related to vaccine? So you need an expert to look in that, and this is very important for the integrity of the immunization program. We have many drug regulator authorities, and I think many have been heard about them specifically during this pandemic, and they are the legal basis for all function, and they should have sufficient human and financial resources, and also they have to have an access to scientific expertise. Example of these drug regulator authorities: the FDA, the US Food and Drug Administration, European Medicine Agency, Japan Pharmaceutical and Medical Device Agency, Health Canada, and many others. Unfortunately, we don't have a unified, so each country have its own drug regulator authority, and sometimes we depend on organization like WHO to be an independent organization and to have all this information coming from all these drug authorities, so they will come to frame decision regarding medicine in general and vaccination in particular. And then we have the National Regulatory Authority, and this is each country have its own. Here in Qatar, we also have, all countries should have a body that regulate and oversight, ensure all medical products, including vaccine in the country, are safe and efficient. There was a need for the National Health Authority after the historic thalidomide tragedy. This is a medicine that have been in 50s used for nausea during pregnancy. And after have been used for 2 decades, like until 1970s, that they found that this medicine have tragic birth defect for newborn, and it was withdrawn from the market. But this tragedy was one of the main drivers that countries should have national regulatory authority, where the function of national medicine and policy and monitoring all the medical products inside the country. And it will be a strong regulatory system, build public confidence in healthcare professionals. Here, some of the pre-qualified countries for vaccine production. I put it here to show that we have, mainly we have 2 countries you can see from the Muslim world, only Indonesia and Islamic Republic of Iran, that they have pre-qualified from WHO that to produce vaccines. Indonesia was a major player for a very long time, and they produce a huge number of vaccines. As example for Islamic countries. Iran, they just have been pre-qualified, and they only right now working in the COVID vaccination. They didn't do any other childhood vaccine or any other vaccines. I put Cuba here as an example that it is one of the developing countries, but still Cuba managed to be a major player in vaccine production, and they have more than 8 vaccines from the 11 vaccines that in their childhood vaccination actually produced in Cuba. In Indonesia, Biofarm Products, it's a big company there in Indonesia, and they have strong prioritized domestic needs by meeting national vaccine needs, including vaccine needs for multiple diseases, childhood diseases, and also vaccine needs for Hajj and Umrah and other vaccines. Iran, as I said, are currently working in the COVID vaccination, and they are achieving a very good result with the vaccine that they will be producing in their countries. So as you can see, in Muslim world, we don't have much countries that they usually make a production of the vaccines, and I will explain later why. So there is 6 regulatory functions defined by WHO to assess and monitor and improve national regulatory authority for vaccine in developing countries. Number 1 should be published set of requirements for licensing. So there should be how to manufacture, how to distribute the product, and also to take it from the main companies, big companies like Pfizer's and other companies that should have the joint licensing process and the right infrastructure for the manufacturers. Also, the surveillance of vaccine and field performance. This is very, very important. This to measure the safety and efficacy of the vaccine should be in the system. Also, the system for batch and lot number release. And usually, vaccine, when they produce a vaccine, usually they do it in batches. And this is for easy to vaccine to be tracked. Right now, I will give an example like AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca, we have some of the vaccine that have been made in UK and other vaccines that have been made in India. And each the vaccine has its own patch. So it will be easy if anything happen in between or any adverse reaction happen with this vaccine to be recalled and investigated. Also, the use of laboratory when needed for testing and for clinical trials. It's very important that the country have that in her system, and also regular inspection of the manufacturer for good manufacturing practice compliance. Ensure that the vaccine are consistently high quality, appropriate for their intent of use, and also evaluation of the clinical performance through authorized clinical trials. Clinical trials is very complicated, and I think yesterday Dr. Leis spoke about that. So WHO recommend that these 6 regulatory functions should be in the country if the country want to produce vaccine inside it. And some of these functions are a little bit difficult to be in the developing countries and some of the Muslim worlds. Now, example for the challenges that may face the developing world, including the Muslim countries, and this paper has also produced by Bank in 2009, and the implementation of the global vaccination coverage remain a pipe dream. There are several difficulties faced government in developing countries, including Muslim world. And for example, the lack of infrastructure for the local vaccine development, the advances in technology, mean a neuro vaccine will need a new technology. We saw right now the sophistication in the messenger RNA vaccine produced by Pfizer and Moderna, and these vaccines also need very ultra low freezing temperature. This will need also equipment to storage them, and definitely this will be a difficulty in the developing countries. And also the expensive of original formulation to develop. Developing countries may have not been up to date with the technology. Is the industrialized nation also they have some of the diseases that they are in particular burden in the developing countries. Maybe in the developed countries, there are not example of that, HIV and malaria. Until now, for the 43 million cases of HIV, 25 million of them are in Africa. So this for the developed world, maybe it's not that interest. So this is another challenge, and for developing countries that they should think about producing their own vaccine. There is right now some of the vaccine in the clinical trials for malaria and for HIV also, but this have been for a very long time. And also a lack of unified surveillance and monitoring vaccination rates and coverage. And lastly, we will come to the social and cultural barriers, Western medicine and influence. We hear a lot, and we heard it even during this COVID pandemic, that people speaking that vaccine have been produced by Westerns so they can sterilize the Muslim world, and also because they don't want them to be there. And many of the misconception that they have been carried out in the social media. Now for the intervention to strengthen regulatory capacity for vaccine, we know that emerging diseases is always there. So when we say emerging disease, this means that a disease that haven't been there. This is a new virus like COVID-19 that appeared from nowhere, or a disease that we already control in the past, like TB, and right now we see that a rise of cases again for TB for multiple reasons. Pandemic influenza, actually we were preparing ourselves all the time. If there will be a pandemic, it will be influenza. And there is many measures have been put in place, making sure that our surveillance program for respiratory viruses are working. Even here in Qatar, we have a very strong respiratory surveillance program, and we are taking samples randomly from public for anybody that he have influenza-like illness symptoms, and anybody that he admitted in the hospital with the severe acute respiratory syndrome, to make sure that we know exactly what are the viruses that are circulating in the Qatar sphere, and also to make sure to order what is the effective influenza vaccine that we need for next year. So we were prepared for influenza, but unfortunately, COVID came with coronaviruses came with totally different new virus that's right now causing this pandemic. So all these threats, plus the biological threat that can happen, all these will are a trigger that we always should think about developing vaccine, especially in the country that they don't have the production pipeline still for the vaccine. Vaccine will continue to be an important medical countermeasure for all these problems. But as I said before, we have to work on the licensing of these vaccines, making sure that we have the support from all the other institutions, like European medicine institution. Also, we should have the make sure that we have the expert provision and shared manufacturers. This is very important. There is a talk for interview by Linda Geddes for Africa CDC chief, and I think that it will be very useful if people can see it. They will have more information about vaccine in Africa in particular. I will touch very quick about vaccination ethics, as Dr. Ghali maybe will speak more about it, but usually things is surrounding personal choice versus a greater public good. Right now, during this COVID pandemic, we saw that vulnerable peoples, and especially elderly people and people with comorbidity, were the victim of the COVID in the start. So the choice whether to vaccinate oneself or one's children is by own nature and ethical choice. It's required individual to act not only or even not primary to promote their self-interest, but also even particular primary to contribute to an important public good, like a herd immunity. So, as I said, it's always about personal choice versus greater public choice. And Also, the research and testing, who should be responsible? And this is another thing about design and development of vaccine. Who should the vaccine be tested? How the vaccine should be tested, and to whom, and who should be tested? Is it developing countries, developed countries? This is also a question that ethically have been raised, and also informed consent and risk versus benefit. And lastly, access issue should be treated equal vaccine, and we spoke about that earlier, that unjustifiable right now distribution of vaccine. Right now, more than 45% of the production of the vaccine, especially COVID vaccine, have been consumed only by wealthiest countries. Until now, we have countries like India, the large population, they didn't reach the 3% vaccination coverage. Similarly in Africa, and right now we can see from the data from WHO that there is a catastrophe happening in Africa regarding the mortality and morbidity rate for COVID. And this is also an ethical dilemma that we need to think about it. Mandate vaccine, not to mandate vaccine, this is a big issue, and it has been there for a very long time. There was in Minnesota, I think in 1883, there was a legislation instructing parents to vaccinate their children against smallpox, because at that time there was a huge outbreak of smallpox. So you can see that from 1883, there was a law, and this law repealed on 1908 and 1994, 1924. In the smallpox outbreak, but the result of that mandate, that right now we don't have a smallpox anymore. By the way, there is because I know that the audience, not all from medical background, there is a difference between smallpox and chickenpox. So chickenpox, this is the one that we see right now in the schools, and self-limited disease, but still we have vaccine for it. But smallpox, this is the nasty disease that I showed you before, that makes scars in the face and the whole body. And right now, all the humanity get rid of the smallpox. We don't have it anymore. Last case of smallpox was in 1980, and this is due multiple reasons, but mainly vaccination and sometimes mandatory vaccination led to disappear of this virus. So necessity and proportionally, sufficient evidence and vaccine safety, sufficient evidence and vaccine efficacy. All these questions need to be addressed when we want to see the mandate of the vaccine or not to mandate. The ethical cost of the COVID immunization. So right now in South Africa, they pay for the vaccine. For example, just giving an example so people can understand it, can put their assumption about the ethical cost. So in Africa, they pay 5.2 per dose for AstraZeneca vaccine, versus in the EU, they pay 2.15 per dose. And this is because high-income countries invested more money into research and development, allowing a discount. So is that right? Yes, we can understand it from commercial point of view, but from ethical point of view and health point of view, and especially that if you want to control the pandemic, maybe South Africa can afford it, but other countries in Africa, maybe they can't. This discount allows for country to reopen economy quicker for EU, and much slower for other countries. On the contrary, we have the COVAX initiative, which demonstrates the importance of vaccine diplomacy, where wealthier nations have supported who cannot afford the vaccine, and we have much like that Gavi initiative. But still, this is not enough, as I addressed before. And lastly, the soft power and some of the vaccines that have been utilized by countries like China and Russia to politically used in many regions and Western region, and this have been addressed by Waters and Yelling into a 2020 research. Now we will come to a very important point that right now we are all facing, and specifically right now during COVID, is vaccine hesitancy. So what is vaccine hesitancy? So WHO define vaccine hesitancy as a refer to delay in acceptance or refusal of vaccine despite availability of vaccine service. It is a threat to undermine the control of preventable communicable diseases. And WHO have stated that vaccine hesitancy is one of the 10 public global health threats. In 2019, WHO have issued what are the 10 public health threats for the globe. And vaccine hesitancy was among them, including antimicrobial resistance, including MERS-CoV, and including Ebola and other pandemics. What are the causes of vaccine hesitancy? There is multiple causes. It's vary from person to person, from country to country. Vaccine debate often surrounding religious, medical, ethical, and legal issues. Also, vaccine hesitancy, this is a very long problem. In 1772, Sermon in the United Kingdom, vaccine are diabolical, operation sinful. Recent objections surrounding lack of confidence, complacency, and convenience, as well as the close line to mandatory vaccination. These also have been addressed. We have seen also here in the Muslim world and social media, there was a lot of misconsumption. Social media has helped to fuel the vaccine hesitancy due to the quick and easy manipulation of information and the speed which this information can travel. Prime example can be seen in Donald Trump and his use of Twitter, influencing beliefs in vaccine in COVID. That was not a serious pandemic and all these issues. This is another example of vaccine hesitancy. It was in 1802, and the British James Gillary. It was about smallpox, and he just did this picture that the cows, because there was an inclusion by cowpox vaccine, and he pictured that the cows are coming from people bodies, as you can see from here. So vaccine hesitancy, as I said, it's a very old problem. It's not something new, and each vaccination program need to work with it and need to be ready for it and have enough scientific evidence that can convince the public about the effectiveness and safety and efficacy of the vaccine. Now, if we come to the Muslim world, in 2021, they are like quarter of the world population. Many of the Muslim countries face several barriers to vaccination and immunization. There is no production of halal-specific vaccine, and they have some observation. I have my own observation about halal vaccines. Vaccine produced require the halal certification as well as to be approved by individual countries and fatwa. Recently, there has been an increase in vaccine preventable disease in Muslim countries. And here, as an example, we have Malaysia, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. I'm not talking here about COVID only. I'm talking about many of vaccine preventable diseases due vaccine refusal from Muslim parents. Now, I can give an example like polio. Polio have been eradicated in most of the countries in the world. The only 2 or 3 countries that still have the polio cases still going on is Afghanistan, Pakistan. And actually, many of the campaigners, immunization campaigns, when they visit the parents' house in these countries, some of them got shot because they believe that they will inject their children with something that they will sterile their children, and many other misconceptions surrounding that. The global health, the global halal pharmaceutical sector is valued like 132 billion and is seen high priority development area. Malaysia are racing to produce the world's first halal vaccine. Actually, as I said, Malaysia, they have the biopharm, and this is a large company that produces many vaccines, and they are trying to produce this halal vaccine. Although I don't, as I said, I don't agree with this term. I think we don't have until now. There is some debate about it, but we couldn't see any proof that this vaccine can contain something that it's against the religion, or if it is contained, I think here the necessity of the public health, to preserve the public health, is more important, I think, in that case. And I think this is the necessity is called in our Muslim religion. Yeah, so we have the divine law, in the divine law, preservation of religion and morality, حفظ النفس, حفظ الدين, preservation of life and health, حفظ النفس, preservation of progeny, حفظ الناس, preservation intellect and sanity, حفظ العقل, and preservation of wealth, حفظ المال. So I think these are some of the things that حفظ النفس, حفظ المال, this all vaccination can provide. Because without them, there will be more mortality, there will be more morbidity, and so on. There was multiple fatwas came for COVID vaccination, and this was an example of this fatwa came from the Australian fatwa, and they are saying that they have no issues with COVID vaccination. We know that meningococcal vaccine is mandatory for Hajj and Umrah, and right now COVID vaccination also mandatory to perform these religious events. Now I will be talking about vaccination in Qatar. So how vaccine regulating Qatar? So I'm describing here that we have something that you can see here in green, which is called INTAG. So INTAG, it's reference to National Immunization Technical Advisory Group. So this National Immunization Technical Advisory Group consists from many consultants and scientists that have been here in Qatar in different profession. Some of them are consultants in pediatrics, some of them are consultants in infectious disease, some of them are consultants in public health, epidemiology, laboratory. All of them are sitting in this committee, and usually they review the immunization schedule here in Qatar to update it or take some vaccines out. And also they review all the information related to vaccine. They meet regularly in monthly basis to make sure that review any adverse reaction for immunization, making sure that they are taking a good decision making, and they taking their information they take it from FDA, local epidemiological data, European Medicine Agency, WHO, CDC. Some information are coming from pharmaceutical companies, and some information also are coming from GCC companies. Usually this committee is an advisory committee. It's not an enforcement committee. So usually they give their advice to MOVH, and Minister of Public Health will enforce what they will advise, and they will enforce it in vaccine updates, if there is a need for vaccine campaign, or if there is a need for update the national immunization schedule. Before, for example, in Qatar, we had hepatitis A as one of the mandatory vaccination for children, but like a couple of years ago, the committee decided that we don't have any cases of hepatitis A in Qatar, and the epidemiological data shows that we can take the vaccine out. And this is just an example how this committee is working. These are the vaccine that administered here in Qatar. Many of these vaccines will administer to children, and we have some of the vaccine that administer to adults. Of course, vaccination for children in Qatar is mandatory. Mandatory how? There is an Amiri decree, number 7 for the year 1994. You can look at it in the intranet and indicate that any child before entering school, he have to have a complete vaccination record history according to Qatar national immunization schedule. So this is part of the Qatar national immunization schedule. And this is here some of the vaccine that giving to adults here in Qatar. Some of it will be seasonal, like influenza and pneumococcal vaccines. Some of it will be travel vaccines will be given if you are traveling to a country where there is an endemicity of certain disease. And you will be giving this certificate in your left-hand side. The main objective of this committee that they are looking for the vaccine, type of vaccine, the correct storage, correct disposable, correct precautions, contraindication, correct site, and they are trying to maximize the immune response and minimize adverse reaction. So this is what we actually looking for in immunization program, to maximize the immune response and minimize as much as possible the adverse reaction from immunization. This here, the vaccine history in Qatar, and this is the vaccine and when they were, this is the milestone, and when they were introduced in Qatar, you can see that it back in 1979, the first vaccines that have been recorded. Maybe before that there is a data, but this is not data that we have it, solid data that we know about it. So all these vaccines and when they have been introduced here in the country. There was, so as I said, when we developed, when the committee developed some policies about the vaccine, who should be first vaccinated. Of course, this is multiple factors will play there. As you can see here during the COVID, so it depends on the mortality data and morbidity data. When we say mortality data, we are talking about death. When we say morbidity data, we are talking about how many sick people came from this virus of infection. So we, in the start of this pandemic, as an example, we were following the WHO recommendation and vaccinated the elderly, healthcare worker, and after that the pregnant women, and there was no, for infant until now, there is no vaccine available for COVID, but usually these are the high risk group that we usually start with whenever we have a vaccine and whenever we have a safe vaccine, that we have enough data, safety data, the vaccine can be used for these high risk group. However, during this pandemic, as an example, also there were some decision to include, for example, teachers, as we saw in our epidemiological reports, that teachers and students were the main driver in some stage of this pandemic. So there was a decision to vaccinate all teachers, and after that vaccinate students until 12 years old, which is Pfizer vaccine. They are the only vaccine approved for this category. So this is how usual Minister of Health, we have something called Strategic Committee. This is the committee that regulates the COVID pandemic. And usually they will have their recommendation, and after that, all health facility here in the country will follow this recommendation. Vaccine hesitancy. There was a question about vaccine hesitancy. As I said, vaccine hesitancy is a concern for any country. We have faced it as we are working operationally with the health center. We are facing it every day. But I tried here to put it as there was two studies, one from Qatar University for Qatar University staff and students, and it showed that 37.4% of respondents stated that they would not take the COVID vaccine, and there was a safety concern stated as a reason 46 for the declination. And in the second study, it's cross-sectional study where they showed 20% of respondents stated that they will not take the COVID vaccine, and 19.8% stated they're unsure. The main concern stated was safety and long-term possible side effects. So these are documented to study to show the vaccine hesitancy. But usually in daily basis, we are hearing from our physician, the frontline physician in the health centers, how they are struggling with some of the patients that they are not convinced. And usually we advise them always to talk to them the science and give them the data and records that we have for the particular vaccine that they need to be vaccinated against. There is a big questions right now. Are Qatar will make the vaccine mandatory or not? Of course, as I said before, there is no indication for that until now. But as I said, in an effort to protect the greater number of people, public health vaccine regulation may reinforce or may mandate on individual autonomy and liberty. And this can be taken, but until now, there wasn't a decision like that. Although we can see that even if it is not said mandatory vaccination in Qatar for COVID, but right now you can see that you cannot enter any place without ihtiraz. Some people will say that this is again twisting the arm, but I don't think so. As I said, right now our data showed that we are doing very good during this COVID pandemic. The numbers are going down, although we are there is community movements and people are going everywhere. But the numbers are going down. We have a big evidence that we have some kind of herd immunity is going with the number of vaccinated persons in the community. We have the Delta variant in the country, but still we don't have much that transmissibility that we see in other countries. Now, this is my last slide, where Qatar and vaccination. So as I said, Qatar has a strong establishment for the rollout of the vaccine. Qatar only purchase vaccine from credible companies. By the way, this is very important. There is during this pandemic, we have seen that in some countries there was falsified vaccine have been distributed, but alhamdulillah, we never see this in Qatar because usually the Qatar government or Ministry of Public Health will purchase only vaccine from the main manufacturers, which is Pfizer and Moderna or AstraZeneca, the main one, and not from any subsidiary company. But unfortunately, there is some countries that they will buy from subsidiary countries, but this can lead that you will not be sure about the credibility of this vaccine, number one. Number two, for vaccine, it's very important to maintain a cold chain. So what is cold chain? Cold chain, this means from the production of the vaccine until where the vaccine will be storage, until the vaccine will be administered in human. And this is here until from the vaccine will arrive in the airports, where it will be stored in the fridges in the Hamad Medical City stores, until it will be in health centers or hospital, until it will be administered to the patient. All of it should maintain a certain temperature that the vaccine will not be spoiled. So this is very important. Second thing, the country has a strong national regulatory authority where all vaccine will be licensed during a very lengthy process. Also, as I said, there is an Amiri Decree number 7 for the year 1994 allows free vaccination for all. And I think this is one of the things that unique in Qatar, that all vaccine here in Qatar are free of charge. And this is include a child vaccine and adult vaccine, including even travel vaccine. In other countries, and I will give UK as an example, if you are traveling from UK to any of the to endemic countries with certain diseases, you will be required to pay for these vaccines. But here in Qatar, either if you are traveling to for countries where they have meningitis or any other infectious disease, you can receive all these vaccines free of charge. I think this is something unique here in Qatar. Also, as I said, Qatar have a very strong surveillance system in immunization. They have electronic vaccine registry, and also they have electronic communicable disease notification program. I think so. For sharing vaccines, putting vaccine, we always have the vaccine, but I think to make it more sustainable in the long run, Qatar may strengthen the infrastructure to allow vaccine production. I think this is important. The supply chain model and access to raw material, this should be strengthened, and working with other countries to make sure that we can have the raw materials and the number of testing facilities and clinical trials to be built up with the expertise needed. Qatar is a member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. In 2020, there was a pledge was made to push for resolve in the production and distribution of vaccine and medicine in member of states. And as you all know, that OIC, the second largest organization after UN, with 57 member states. and it's a voice of the Muslim world. So I think in Qatar we have a big chance that vaccine can be produced in the country and have the sustainability of these vaccines and make sure that we'll be ready for any emerging diseases in future, God forbid. And thank you very much. This was my last slide, and this is my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for this very informative presentation. I have here a couple of questions. I myself have also a couple of questions. One of the questions is the conspiracy theory and misconception regarding side effects such as infertility, biological deformities, and genetic mutation or modification. Do these claims carry any weight?
Until now, of course, we have to talk about data and what we have. If we are talking about Qatar, generally, we couldn't see it anywhere in the world. And if we are talking in Qatar in specific, as I said, we have a very strong surveillance program. Any vaccine have been administered here in Qatar, it have been observed. Usually, we call patients in the 3rd day and 5th day after they take vaccination. And also, we have an hotline for people to report any adverse reaction from immunization. I can assure you from the 3 million, nearly 4 million vaccines that have been administered in the country, that we had very few cases, less than 1%, that have been concerned. But most of them, most of the adverse reaction that we had, it was pain in the site of the injection or slight temperature elevation, and that's it. But and from the science, from the current data that we see, we couldn't see that there is any fact about these claims until now.
So we don't have any solid evidence that these things can be among the side effects.
Until now, no, we don't have it, and it's for this COVID vaccine and for other vaccination, and we didn't see it. As I said before, there was an incident about additives that have been added in the vaccine before in the history, and this led to certain complication, but still it didn't even go for sterility or defect or malformation. We didn't see that. No.
Okay. Another question is, how long are COVID-19 vaccines effective for?
Until now, and according to WHO, it's 12 months. But we're still waiting for more data to come. But if you receive the vaccine, there is a solid evidence that you have antibodies against COVID viruses, COVID-19 virus, for 12 months coming. But of course, this is also different from person to person, and it depends also on your status, your mental status, your physical, and your general health in general. Yeah.
Another question, given the reality of vaccine hesitancy, what are some ways Qatar has worked to combat hesitancy on a national level? What has proven to be the most effective effort or program until now?
I think transparency, number one. You have to be very transparent with public. You have to be very transparent with public. I think the data that have been published in daily basis about number of vaccine administered, the data that have been published in every day for even the way that communicate with the public about if there is any rumors came to the social media, that it will be addressed straight away by the scientific committee, and they have one unified message. I think it's one of the lessons that we learned during this pandemic. It's always useful to have one communication office to make all the risk communication during this pandemic. And everybody speak the same. Yeah, this is very important. And most importantly, to provide the scientific data for your frontline staff. So when your frontline staff will be faced by this question, they will know the answer in particular, and not everybody will talk something different.
Okay, thank you. I also have a question, if I may. You mentioned about the prioritization policies. Who is entitled to get the vaccines first? Of course, in the bioethics literature, we have different models about that. One of the models was the one adopted by WHO, that we go to the most vulnerable. People who are in the healthcare, people who have chronic diseases, who are at risk of dying first if they get the vaccine. But of course, there are also other models like giving the vaccine to the people who move too much. Like the people who are at work in general, because these are the people who carry the virus and infect the others. So the most active should, anyhow, there are models. It seems the WHO used one model, but you mentioned that Qatar added one more, which is the school teachers. Are you aware what kind of discussion? Why was this the case?
Actually, as I told you, so usually we, Qatar usually review the data and the distribution of the disease in the community. So it will divide it by zones, it will divide it by schools, it will divide it even by companies, it will divide. So where right now we can see more of the COVID cases. And during when the schools were open, with many cases coming from teachers and many cases come from students. So at that time, vaccine was not approved for students. So how can we protect teachers? Because teachers are the one, maybe if they get it, they will have the comorbidity. And we have some teachers that are comorbid, there's some teachers that they are immune compromised, some teachers that they are can have a bigger risk of getting complication, morbidity, and mortality from COVID. That's why the decision was made to vaccinate teachers to make sure that the teachers are protected, because we don't have any vaccine for children, and we know that the children were in somehow the main driver of the COVID infection. Usually, it's a race between infection and injection. Right now, it's a race between infection and injection. As much you can inject more, so as less infection you will have in the community.
You mentioned, you referred to an Amiri decree about vaccination.
Yes.
This is of course before COVID-19. No?
Yes, it is in 1994.
1994, about making it available or making it mandatory?
No. Actually, in 1994, it was stated that any child, two things. It stated that all vaccine in Qatar are free of charge. All medicine for communicable diseases are free of charge. And if you have any infectious disease and you went to any health facility in Qatar, the treatment is free of charge. If you need a vaccination inside Qatar, it's free of charge. And also in that Amiri degree, it's mentioned that if a child wants to enter school, he have to complete his full vaccination according to Qatar national immunization schedule.
So the Amiri decree is about making it available.
Making it available,
free
yes.
of charge.
Make it available and free of charge, yes.
And this is mandatory for school children. Is it also in the Amiri decree?
Yes. So it wasn't saying that vaccine are mandatory. It's saying that if you want to enter the school, you have to have a full vaccination. You have to finish your full vaccination. You have complete vaccination according to Qatar national immunization schedule.
Yeah, so something like what we now have about getting in a restaurant or something.
Yes,
you have to
this is here the dilemma that I was speaking about. And right now, as I said, we don't have any mandatory vaccination here in Qatar. But you will some of the people that you will meet, they will tell you that okay, it's not mandatory, but if I want to go to a restaurant, I have to show my ihtiraz. If I say yes, you have to do that because the public health And public need is more important right now than individual choice of liberty.
Yes. The last thing, Dr. Khalid, do you have a say, do you have a word you would like to say something about people who are still hesitant about vaccines?
Yes, exactly. Actually, firstly, thank you for this opportunity, because this is a new group of students, or a new group of another group of the community groups that usually we don't have much access to, but right now through this lecture we'll have an access. And the main thing here, that because they can cascade these messages to other community members and families. Until now, data, I'm asked them as a scientific people who are studying and making sure that they are following literature. I'm saying just follow the data. Just follow the data and don't follow any misinformation. If I say something without the data, this is just an opinion. But if I want something to convince you, I should show you a data. So just follow the data of what's happening with the vaccines. Follow the data for the adverse reaction for immunization. If you have a concern, ask about this concern for your health facility. And please, you can have my email to address any issues that anybody have any question, or have any hesitancy, or have anything related to vaccination that need to be explained. We will be happy to do that, to explain what needed.
Thank you so much. I strongly support your advice, which does not apply only to scientific knowledge and scientific information and vaccines in particular, but I believe in our age, in our digital age and social media dominant age, it applies to all aspects of life, including the religious studies and Islamic studies, where we are in an age where much more information is available than before, but it seems that having too much information is as problematic as having very little information. We have to learn how to navigate through these mountains of information.
Yes.
So thank you so much. Of course, we will meet tomorrow, inshallah, at 6 o'clock in the open forum for question and answers with our students and with others in the public, and we can continue this interesting discussion, inshallah. For the time being, I thank you very much for your lecture and your Q&A session, and we will see you tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. So with thanking Dr. Khalid, we come to the break. We will have a 15-minute break. We come back to start at 2:15 Doha time, inshallah. Thank you so much.